We welcome now to the program Senator Nicole Akins-Boyd, represents a District 9, which incorporates Lafayette and Panola counties, serves as the chair of the Senate Study Group on Women, Children, and Families, and vice chair, Senate Universities and Colleges Committee. Senator, that's not current, is it?
That's not.
Please tell us what's current. I apologize.
It's no problem. I'm chair of Universities and Colleges and vice chair of Medicaid.
Thank you. I thought that was true, so we got to update our records here. My apologies for that.
No problem.
So, I wanted to make sure we got all that straight. So, take a breath. I got to. Man.
Y'all were having an interesting segment earlier about inviting conference and what happens sometimes, just kind of so the listeners know. What'll happen sometimes is when you send a bill over to the opposite house, your house has put in something called a reverse repealer.
Sure.
And so I think you've told your listeners many times what the reverse repealer does. It basically makes the bill null and void. And so you have to invite conference when it has one of those reverse repealers in it, because you have to take that reverse repealer out. And why people ask for those reverse repealers, it's not to delay the process. It is because you like the concept of the bill.
Yeah.
But it may have something in there that really has a bad effect or a negative effect. I saw them put it in yesterday. We had a bill yesterday that is something I was very much in favor of, but there were some provisions in there that some other people really had some consternation about. And the bill was about making sure that we get these illegal Chinese products off the store shelves that our kids are getting to vape or to have intoxicating hemp or anything like that. And so the bill was a good bill, but there were a couple of provisions in there that people weren't comfortable with.
Okay.
So they added a reverse repealer. Now, what the House will have to do on that particular piece of legislation, so everybody believes the ideal is a good thing, but they believe that we need to work on a little bit of that language anymore.
Okay.
So the House, what they'll do is then they'll invite conference on that.
Gotcha.
And so that way then they can get in conference, and the concerns that individual members have about particular provisions or whatever, they can go work with the conferees and get that bad language out. So it sounds very laborious, but it's a good process in making sure that we get a bill that's good for the public.
And so just to clarify, and I appreciate that great explanation, we, for the most part, understood that process. What's confusing is the syntax.
Yes.
Because the slash confused, it's decline, and I'm sort of putting those two together like, well, they declined to concur, and they're declining conference is the way I interpreted it, but yet the bill wasn't dead, and that was confusing.
Yeah.
And
so,
Representative Ford clarified it for me.
So the motion is do not concur and invite conference.
I get it.
But it is confusing because it's a negative statement before a positive statement.
Agree. How about I don't know, a period or in lieu of or a semicolon, something different. I saw those two as combined, it being the predicate of the verb to decline, right?
Yes.
So combined those two. So we just misinterpreted it, and we want to clarify it. But it's confusing, and especially when you get legislation like this that has lots of actions on it, right?
Right.
And especially and having a deadline upon us, like, okay, what's next? To keep this thing going.
Yes. So and the SAFER Act is a really good piece of legislation, and I think I fully expect us to come out with legislation in regards to that. So.
Except I did confirm with Senator Harkins that the definitions were stripped out of it.
I know, and and they need to go back in.
Okay, because it's impotent without them.
Exactly. So we're going to push really hard to get those definitions back in.
Okay, so the good news, Rhino, is that you and I both read the same thing, which is these definitions ain't in this amendment, right? I want to make sure we got that right.
Right.
Okay. So, but the hope is, the plan is, let's get in conference, let's get all that fixed, because it's a good bill, is it not?
It's a good bill.
Yeah.
It's a good bill. And it's a bill that it does exactly what you talked about doing is, so I think you used the analogy earlier. I was listening to you. Your right to, always in law school, they said, your right to free speech ends when you go to a crowded theater and shout fire. because that could, the harmful effects that could be. And so, I mean, people have rights, but your rights end when they affect somebody else and negatively affect somebody else.
Impose on their rights.
Yes. So, and there's been a lot of, information and stuff like that. So there's been a lot of people really work on that legislation for a very long period of time. It's, and you talked about the constitutionality and all of that. This is legislation that everybody has very much worked on to make sure that we respect everyone's rights, but also protect those.
Sure.
That their rights need to be had. So.
And let's be clear, we wouldn't be the first state to enact such legislation.
No, we are not the first state.
So we're not. Right, we're not testing the water here.
We are not testing the waters, and numerous lawyers have looked this through, and to make sure that we have a piece of legislation that protects what it needs to protect.
And in fact, we've had some actions, some incidents over the last couple of weeks that would have in fact violated, right?
We have.
If this were enacted.
Yes. So this is what I think it's a good piece of legislation, and it's really interesting. When you talk to Democrats, a lot of Democrats really support this legislation as well. So, because this is just protecting who it needs to protect.
Okay.
So, it's been interesting to see my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. Some of them are very quietly very supportive sometimes of this legislation.
Okay. Well, then it's a no-brainer, right?
I think so.
All right.
Yes. So,
can we I don't know this for sure. I'm just an observer. Do we got some political gamesmanship maybe going on here? And I'm not accusing anybody of anything. I'm just speculating.
This is the time of year always when I think we should really look at changing the rules this summer.
Okay.
And I think that when we introduce legislation, sometimes we get caught up if it's a House bill or a Senate bill, which is just ridiculous. I've got a lot of legislation alive that it was in a House bill as well. I don't care if it's a House bill or a Senate bill. And I'm happy to, and my coworkers also in the House, a lot of them feel the same way I do. But I feel like almost we need to look at a rules change, and it's different in different states that we've looked at, we really ought to look at the process. If you introduce a piece of legislation, I think it really should have a House sponsor and a Senate sponsor.
Yeah, okay.
And so our rules right now really don't, it's either a House bill or a Senate bill.
Yeah.
But how much better would legislation be if you worked with your House colleagues on the front end? And sometimes we do that, and we introduce a House bill and a Senate bill, and we just with the hopes that one goes through.
Yeah.
But what we should be doing is really working with them on the front end and both putting our names out there and say, this is good legislation that we both support.
Well, especially at the state level where you don't have the rules you do at the federal level, which is you got a filibuster in the Senate.
Right.
So we're both just simple majorities.
Exactly.
Or if it's 3/5 votes based on it having a tax situation, but or making it veto proof. But to pass it in the houses, that's not the case.
Right. And so a number of other states really do allow for senators and representatives to put forth legislation that has both your names in it from the get-go.
Okay.
And I think that's something we really need to look at, so we kind of stay out of some of the gamesmanship that's played right here kind of at the end.
Okay. All right. Well, this is a person, Karen and Ripley says to me, this is just another way for the male to restrict a woman's rights. Put on a dress and say we are female, what do you think is going to happen? They will win. I don't think so. I don't feel like that's the goal or the objective here.
No, I think the goal and objective is really, we called it, it's safety.
Yeah, sure.
It's about safety. It's about a woman being able to know that she can go in that restroom and there's only going to be another woman in there. It's really a safe bill. And that's why the names around the country have different names. Different people worked on this piece of legislation, and everybody said, what is this about? This is about safety.
Yeah.
And it's making sure that we have protected spaces for our daughters and our younger. You've got Senator Harkins there who sponsored this. He's got 2 young daughters.
Yeah.
That's what it's about. It's about safety.
And it's not like we haven't been informed by real life incidents in like Virginia is probably the one that honestly was largely responsible for flipping the governor's seat to Republican. Governor Youngkin ran on that.
Well, and you've had really crazy stuff happen across the country. Kansas, you had sorority houses It's just some really things that you go, are we really dealing with this? I mean, it's just crazy that this is what we're going through.
We're coming right back, folks, in the Element Well studio with Senator Nicole Akins-Boyd. Stay with us. You guys need a break for a little while, don't you, Senator?
I think we do need a break. I'm looking forward to a big weekend in Oxford. We've got the Grove Bowl going on. We've got Mississippi State and Ole Miss playing each other.
Yep.
And I'm looking forward to a good weekend in Oxford. So, and in the meantime, doing a lot of homework for
in
for
good
conference.
weather.
Yeah, for conference, getting ready for conference week next week. I
want to pass on to the audience. The Dow down now, folks, 519. So the sell-off continues, and I don't know if that's because there's any additional news on what might be happening over in the powder keg that is the Middle East, but there are very credible reports coming out of the region from the Israelis, and they're pretty good at this stuff, where they suspect that an attack on them may be imminent. And so that is causing the price of oil to skyrocket. The market's experiencing a huge sell-off. I pray that doesn't happen. It's a big old problem. And we got to get this thing resolved and stop shooting and killing each other. Obviously.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So.
All right. So back here at home, I know that serving on the Medicaid committee, vice chair, along with Senator Kevin Blackwell, who serves as the chairman, not sure I've seen as much discussion about the Medicaid program in the state of Mississippi as we have this year.
Absolutely. So we'll be meeting with the House next week. We have very different plans, and so we'll be meeting with the House to see if we can come to some consensus on what a plan would look like going forward. And I'm optimistic and hopeful that we can do that. So we'll look and see kind of what that plan would look like. I think we're all still gathering additional information out there. We have a lot of information coming in, particularly in regards to the federal exchange, and how many people are on it, and how many people are serving with it, and how many people are falling off the Medicaid rolls with recertification and all of that. So it's kind of a moving numbers.
Very much so.
And which is difficult as you're developing policy not to have those numbers, that are finite. But it's just part of the process, and we are definitely doing that. We've still got information that we're asking for that is being should be here Monday, so that we continue looking at all of this. So I think I'm looking forward to the discussions with the House on this.
So the latest report I have is that the Lieutenant Governor and Speaker of the House have indicated that some hearings, public hearings.
Well, they're saying public conference meetings. And so the legislature used to actually do this. This is kind of not a new concept. It was done quite often back a number of years ago. So you would have these public conference committee meetings. You didn't have those when you had, interestingly enough, that was before we live streamed a lot of that. Yeah. But I very much remember going to those conference committees, and they were kind of open to the public, and people would discuss issues and ideas back and forth. Okay. So they have both committed that we will kind of discuss these things in public back and forth. Okay.
And I have asked folks around here that do all the guest scheduling to see if we can get Commissioner Mike Chaney to come on. I think Alex just told me he's going to be coming on with me Monday. So right. we're going to dig more into the insurance aspect of this, which pertains, of course, to the ACA exchanges.
Exactly. And so he presented, and we passed through yesterday. We passed through the legislation. I believe it has to go back to the House on that. But we passed through the legislation really looking at a state exchange and the benefits of what a state exchange to do. And he gave us a timeline. And I'm really excited about the possibility of that, because it brings more insurers into the marketplace.
How?
Because when you have that state exchange, you have more people coming in under those plans. And so he is estimating, he said anywhere from 2, 3 to 4 is what.
2, 3 to 4 additional carriers?
That could come into the marketplace with them, because they know they have a pool of people.
New carriers.
New carriers. Because they know they have a pool of applicants here. They know, there's some financial stability in that you have that pool of applicants here. And so he estimates that there could be more to the marketplace. And that's kind of exciting for Mississippi. So we have a very limited marketplace sometimes on our insurance providers. And so it would be really interesting to see what that could do and what that could happen. It also has some financial benefits to the state. And I have his report that he did own it and presenting it. And he's saying that there's anyway an estimated savings of $28 to $37 million.
That's because we pay user fees to the federal government for operating the exchange. So this has been an option since 2014.
Exactly.
This
Yes.
is nothing new. The issue was back in that time period, the technology wasn't as perfected as it is today, and states were spending hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars building out their own exchange. I think only a dozen or so of them actually have their own state-operated exchange now, but we do have a template. We have a model for that. And so it's a little more cost-effective to create your own.
It's a great deal more cost-effective to
significantly.
To do your own.
Yep.
And some of the states, interestingly enough, I learned from Commissioner Cheney, actually followed Mississippi's model that kind of he put forth in legislation. So I believe Arkansas actually used his model. Right. And so he presented to us in committee that Louisiana and Alabama Alabama is looking at it right now. Louisiana is looking at it. And so you have a number of our other southern states that are all probably about to enter this space.
Yeah, it's a phase-in deal where it's you start out kind of as a hybrid federal and state, and you receive federal assistance, and there's some user fees associated with that, and then eventually you kind of wean yourself off of that. You go fully state. So what would happen is, for the audience, is you would eliminate the cost to the federal government of operating the exchange on behalf of the state. But instead, those user fees would be revenue to the state. The state would have to pay the expenses of operating the exchange out of that. The net effect of that would be a positive to the state. That's the idea.
Yes, that's the idea. And so, and you're also, when you do that, you're looking at adding jobs to the state. I think he's estimating that you would actually create 300 local private sector jobs.
I think that's true.
And so, so there's some, some ancillary benefits with doing that, but it could, and the savings over 5 years would be $137 million to $196 million over 5 years. And
that sounds right.
It's pretty significant.
I think the
savings.
net between the user fees and the cost to operate would probably produce that.
Yeah.
Of course, the challenge is, I think it's great if we could bring in more carriers and have more choice, and perhaps that would drive price of coverage down. The problem is, that it's always an issue with respect to insurance, which is regulated at the state level in all 50 states.
Right.
Is building a provider network. So you can bring in 3 or 4 more carriers, but as you well know, most of the providers say, we got plenty. We don't need any more.
Well, most of the providers are looking for the products. It's been really interesting. I can't tell you how many conversations with hospitals now and local providers now on the exchange, whether or not they're going, and they are actually readily, many of them enrolling in to be providers.
Way more open than they were historically.
More, yes.
I agree.
Because you have difficulty if you're on Medicaid now. One of our greatest problems that we have, which is the existing Medicaid population, is providers have to limit their amount of patients that they can take on Medicaid for the most part, because it doesn't cover their cost. But many of them still take it in the area and try to make sure that they're servicing the patients, but they limit those slots oftentimes.
Yeah. And or don't take it at all.
Or don't take
Specialists in particular.
Yes. And so the exchange rate pays them from their figures that they're giving me, not the exchange gives me. They're saying anywhere from 27 to, depending on what the procedure is, it's about 27 to 40% higher than Medicaid rates are.
Yep.
And so, and if you talk to your hospitals, rural hospitals, that they're kind of giving the same. So it's interesting. They're all kind of giving us back the same information time and time again. And so many of them are enrolling in these exchange programs because they, and they're having more. The other thing too is more and more patients are asking if they are a provider on that network. So it's driving it. As people come off Medicaid and they go to these exchange programs, you're seeing more and more
That's right.
people
That's
that have it.
Enrollment's up, and so the universe is bigger. The exception to that, to the reimbursement delta there is that there are special incentives for rural health care clinics. Right. So Medicaid's actually higher for them but that's the exception there. We can continue this discussion. You got to go. Or you can stay around.
I can stay around.
We got Senator Nicole Akins-Boyd. Appreciate that. We're coming right back, folks. Half an hour left from the Element Wealth Studio. Blessed to have Senator Nicole Akins-Boyd stay another segment with us. Really appreciate that, Senator. I know it's Friday and you got a lot of other stuff to do, but you and I haven't been able to chat too much on the air. You've had a busy session.
We've had a busy session, and we tried, and you literally had me having to go take a vote.
I know.
In the middle of yes, I think I've had so many people say, "Did you really take a vote, or was that staged?" I was like, "No, I was on the floor taking a vote," and it read off. So.
And I'm sitting here talking to you from the studio, and I can imagine you darting back and forth with your phone and your voting button, like, I got to let her go, man. She's got to go take care of business. But we understand, and that's the risk, of course, of a 10-to-1 show. You guys are often right in the heat of things down there, and we understand that. But I do appreciate you coming on. So just wrapping it up on Medicaid here, we have two different approaches, and I think leveraging the exchanges to cover the group from 100 to 138%. I think that fundamentally makes sense, and it's something, as you and I've talked about, it's been around for 10 years. It's nothing new. But I think what's changing is that our providers here are getting a little bit more comfortable with the plans sold in the exchanges. I think the carriers selling the exchanges have kind of improved their performance as well.
They have, from what I've been talking to my rural hospitals and other hospitals, and what we're talking to with physicians across the state in different population markets. The exchange, those plans that are on the exchange are paying more consistently. They're paying more on time, so they're much more interested in taking those plans. And so we're seeing kind of the newness of all of that kind of wear off, and we're seeing more stability kind of in that marketplace.
Yeah.
So, and interesting, one of the national reports says that we've had 180,000 between that 100 and 138 apply. I think we really have about 150 who are actually paying the premiums and are actually using it. I think that's the latest numbers.
Okay.
And I feel like these numbers change almost weekly.
The enrollment, I check it on Kaiser Family. It's gone up significantly.
Yes. And so the good thing is, as we have people that are unwinding off of Medicaid, they are going into these exchanges and following through and paying their premiums and doing that. So I think there's a strong interest in us. And the good thing about the exchange plans is they do, and then they come to a point where they're not good in the marketplace. Yeah. Let's be candid on that. But what happens is you can go, I think the next step is like 150. So you go from 138 and then 150, like really.
Well, in the exchange, it's 100 to 150. Then it's 150, 200, 200, 250, all the way up to 400.
Right. But they can stay on those plans and kind of gradually go up.
Yes.
So one of the things that's so difficult to deal with when you're, trying to help people is just that benefits cliff. Yeah. And I saw it when we were doing all the stuff with women's, family, and children. I would have business owners tell me, I can't give her a raise. I can't make her a manager, because if I do, that will put her $1 over of her benefits. And I was like, how screwed up have we got this?
Yeah.
That we have this cliff.
But that's all income eligibility tested programs are like that. $1 more and I don't get anything.
Yeah. And so instead of kind of weaning people to success and getting them off of this, and that is the one thing nice about the exchange is it does that. It weans people a little bit off the subsidies and gets them moving forward without, just completely cutting them off. So I was shocked the number of people said, okay, that they were telling me, oh, she can't become a manager because it will put her at too much over. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I mean,
but it's not. But so with the exchange, the tiering model in the exchanges, which starts at 0% for 100 to 150,
right?
And that's what happened in the American Rescue Plan. All of those percentages shifted up in the income ranges, such that first strata has zero cost premiums, which made it equivalent to essentially Medicaid, except you got an out of cost out-of-pocket cost responsibility, but it's minimal with the cost-sharing reduction.
Yeah, it's minimal. I've got it here, and it's really
anywhere
minimal.
from $100 a year to $1,400 a year, depending on what plan you choose.
Exactly.
So
I mean, like at an urgent care, you have a $5 copay.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, really minimal fees.
And
on
there's
that.
there are caps on annual basis, just like there are. That's what I was referring to, is maybe $100 in a year, up to like $1,800 for that first income range. Yeah. Is that about what you see?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I've actually thought, well, maybe we could get a waiver from Medicaid to pay that, and we put them in the exchanges. To help cover it, because there are some people that will say, if I've got to commit to an out-of-pocket cost here, I'm not going to enroll. I can't afford it. Right.
And so there's some states that have kind of played around with that.
They have.
And some of those states, it winds up actually costing a little bit more, because when you do those and you put them on those plans, you also have to pick up the wraparound services that Medicaid would offer.
That's right.
So it makes it a little bit more expensive for the state to do those in a number of instances. And you've got 2 states that have really played around with that. So,
and I just want to be clear, either way, it's welfare. It doesn't matter if the federal government's paying for it or the state's paying for it. These are subsidies, tax credits. This is direct payments to the insurance company on behalf of the enrollee, essentially. Right. So it's just a matter of who's footing the bill at the end of the day.
Exactly. And I think the Senate, and I will say this, I can't speak for the whole Senate, but I will say the work requirements is a very essential part of the Senate. It is something the Senate is absolutely committed for, is to have strong work requirements. Most everybody is that is really a non-starter. If you can't talk about those work requirements, for many of the senators, you have to have those strong work requirements in there. And I think in the Senate plan, it requires 30 hours a week at least of work. And so not sure what the federal government will do with our application on that, but I think that it's with the labor force participation rate that you and I talk about. I think every time we are in here is as the lowest in the country, or we kind of battle sometimes with West Virginia and that. I think we're lowest right now.
We are.
And we have got to make sure that we're doing everything we do to keep the workforce that we have in the workforce, and then try to encourage others to get in that workforce.
Final statement I make on this, that only applies to the plan as contemplated by the Senate.
Yes.
Because they would have to have an income in that range that it would cover from the current, like 40%, I think, Medicaid covers up to 100%. If they're in the exchanges, the point I'm making, they have some income. They don't qualify for subsidies exchanges unless they're working and have some income, because it starts at 100%.
Exactly.
Okay, just want to clarify
absolutely.
that. Okay. Let's turn our attention to my second most favorite subject, the public employees retirement system.
Oh, wow.
So it looks like at this point we may get something, and that's something, I guess, latest move by the Senate was to rescind the 2% employer contribution rate scheduled increase for July 1 as enacted by the Board of PERS. Senator Parker, of course, inserted that amendment in one of the bills pertaining to PERS. But the other big thing is it would strip that power away from the board.
It would. That was one of the amendments he made. And I also believe, too, the House put in a piece of legislation, too, to rescind the 2% as well. So you've got both of those provisions kind of going through right now, that we'll see kind of where this goes and what the appetite is for the body in that.
Okay.
We are PERS, but let us say loud and clear, no one is trying to, right now, there's no legislation alive that would reconstitute the PERS board.
Right.
So yes.
Not only that, I've not talked to a member of the legislature yet in either house that has indicated support for modifying the benefit structure.
Oh, absolutely not. There's no, thank you for bringing that up. There's no one that is trying to modify the benefit structure and the defined benefits that have been promised to our retirees.
Okay. So we're not going to change the benefit structure. We're not going to increase the employer contribution rate. If you increase the employee contribution rate, you've got to increase benefits in a corresponding way, according to opinion I have from the AG.
Right.
So that leaves you with the only other option if the goal is to increase the funding ratio, and that's just cut a check from the money that comes into the Treasury there over to PERS.
Exactly.
Right? That's kind of where we're headed. It seems to me that way.
Well, I think that discussion is being had at the Capitol as to that right now. Our cities and our counties and our school districts and our state employees, they are the 2% right now would be very financially challenging for a number of them.
They made that very clear.
And they have made that very, very clear. So that is something that is definitely being talked about in the legislature right now is what we can do to help that situation out. So.
One final question before we go here, if you'll answer it, is do you think we might be headed to a special session on education funding?
I hope not. I hope that the governor would let us work the process through this summer. There's a lot of people. I had calls about it from multiple superintendents who were interested. They like certain parts of the proposal.
You keep talking in the next segment if you want to.
Okay.
Stay around, Senator Nicole Akins-Boyd. Appreciate that. We're visiting with Senator Nicole Akins-Boyd. Really am grateful, Senator, for staying with us. But this is a good time, actually, to have these interviews because we got so much in the rearview mirror that we can discuss, but so much still on the table.
We have a lot on the table right now still.
And that's important. So we were just talking about, before we went to break there, this education funding. And, again, that's probably another issue that's gotten as much attention under the dome that I can remember, maybe not since Initiative 42, which was a ballot measure that would have completely changed the way that works. So here we are.
Here we are, and it is something, probably of all the issues, it is the issue that is probably the most important to my district. I live in an area with strong public schools. Yeah. The area has grown because we have strong public schools. I have Oxford, Batesville, and Sardis. And I mean, you really look at those school districts that I have, and they are high performing. And so this is something that you get calls from everybody about, not just from school superintendents, but you get it from parents that are wanting to know what this means, what this looks like. And so I think it is something that this is something, and one of my superintendents that I call, and superintendents not just from my area will kind of call. My dad was in the school business, as he used to say, and so I'll get a number of them calling me. But I think Tennessee looked at they changed their formula a number of years ago, and one of the things that Tennessee did is they went around the state really kind of explaining what the formula was, how it was going to be changed, and really had that formula sold by the time that they came back in a legislative session. They did the formula, I think, for 2 years at that point, and then they had a repealer in it if the formula wasn't working in some shape, form, or fashion. Yeah. And so they took their time, they did it right, but they made sure the public understood, that all the people that were working in the school districts really understood what this was and what the change was. So I know there's some, I've looked at it. I have not gotten in depth in it. There's some things that I really like about it, and there's some things that are causing me to have a little bit of pause based on the information I've received right now. Now, that studying this and really getting us time to do this, I think, is super important on that. But there's some things that I really like about it. For instance, just mentioning to you, I'm parent of a special needs child. I've worked in special education advocacy, helping families, long before I got into the legislature. And what you find kind of too is in school districts across the state is you will find school districts that are doing a better job at educating those with special needs. And you have parents that will flock to those districts because those districts are doing a better job doing it. Though, my child was much more expensive to educate than the typical child. He had autism, so that required speech, that required OT, and that required PT. Gotcha. At different points in times. And so you'll see that these parents will go to a lot of these districts who do a better job with that. Well, that's a greater burden to the taxpayer there because my child costs more money. Needs more money, which is why we also have the ESAs for special needs as well, so they can find the place that can best take care of their child. Exactly. And so this new formula, from the way that I'm understanding it, it would kind of recognize that within school districts. It's an adjustment, a factor. Yeah, it would be a factor, and they we're given some adjustment for it. I think that's a very equitable thing to do.
Okay.
So I think there's things in here that I really I'm hopeful to look at, because I think those are things that are more fair to our school districts across the state, because you want to help those school districts that are actually doing a really good job at this, because I think it's better for society to get these children as high functioning as possible.
Sure. And
so those are types of things that I really kind of want to see us be able to look at and understand how those work. So I hope that we, and I think I mentioned to you during the break, sometimes people say, oh, well, this is just them being bureaucratic, and slowing down. It's not. This is something that's too important for our state. We need to study it, and we need to know what all the implications are before we upcycle this.
I think we could safely say education, Medicaid, PERS, need more info.
Right.
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 But we got to stay on it because there are problems. All right.
Absolutely.
I want to read this before you go. Just want to say thanks to Nicole. Her dad was awesome, and her mom was a real angel. Saved my aunt in the 80s. No joke. Thank you, too, Gerard. Pass that on to you. Really nice. Yep. Senator, thanks so much for joining us today. I hope you get some rest. Have a good weekend. Folks, the same out there to you guys. We are out of here.